They say empires don't fall in daylight. They collapse in silence, when everyone believes they are untouchable. 8 years ago, the most feared crime dynasty in the city ruled without challenge. Politicians owed them favors. Judges owed them silence. Rivals owed them graves. At the center of it all stood a man they called the Don, a strategist so precise that even Betrayal had to schedule an appointment. But power has one weakness: legacy. And his only legacy was a daughter. She wasn't raised like other children. She didn't play in gardens or attend birthday parties with balloons and laughter. She sat quietly at the edge of long dinner tables while men discussed shipments, territories, loyalty. She listened. She watched. She remembered. Most underestimated her. That was their first mistake. The night it happened, the estate was sealed tighter than a vault. Armed guards at every gate. Surveillance sweeping every corridor. Trusted men positioned like chess pieces around the mansion. Inside, the Don was hosting a private meeting. No phones. No outsiders. Just inner circle captains and one woman seated at his right hand, his new wife. Elegant. Composed. Watching everything. The girl was upstairs in her room when the first gunshot echoed through the marble halls. One shot. Precise. Not chaos. An execution. Downstairs, panic erupted, but it was controlled panic. Too controlled. The guards didn't scramble. They didn't fire back wildly. It was as if some of them had already been expecting it. The Don fell beside the long oak table, blood spreading slowly beneath him. No dramatic final words. No heroic last stand. Just shock in his eyes. Shock, not at being shot, but at who had ordered it. Upstairs, the girl didn't scream. She moved. She had heard raised voices before. She knew the difference between anger and danger. This was danger. Her bedroom door opened, not violently but carefully. A trusted bodyguard stood there. One who had worked for her father since before she was born. He didn't explain. He didn't comfort. He simply said, "We have to go. Now." Down the back staircase. Through service corridors. Past hidden passages she didn't know existed. Behind them, more gunshots rang out, but fewer than expected. Too few for a real takeover. This wasn't a war. It was a decision. By morning, the headlines were already written. Underworld king assassinated in internal power struggle. But there was one detail that confused everyone. The daughter. She was declared dead. Burned in a fire that conveniently consumed part of the estate during the chaos. No body publicly shown. Closed casket. Swift burial. The empire mourned for exactly 3 days. Then it reorganized. Leadership shifted smoothly into the hands of the widow. The stepmother. She addressed the captains with tears in her eyes and steel in her voice. "The bloodline ends with me," she said. "For the stability of the family." No one openly challenged her. Because those who might have, were either missing or suddenly very quiet. But here's what the empire didn't know. The girl was never in that coffin. That night, as smoke rose from the estate, a black car crossed state lines under heavy rain. Inside sat a child who had just watched her world dissolve without shedding a single tear. She asked only one question. Who did it? The bodyguard driving her didn't answer. Because he didn't know who to trust. And that was the most terrifying part. This wasn't an outside attack. It was internal. Planned. Sanctioned. Someone at that dinner table had decided the Don's time was over. And the heir? She was never supposed to survive long enough to ask questions. For 8 years, the empire thrived under new management. Profits increased. Rivals disappeared. All evidence of the old regime slowly erased. The girl became a rumor, then a myth, then nothing, until tonight. 8 years later, in the same estate, renovated, fortified, modernized, the current Don sat alone in his private office. A knock at the door. A package. No return address. Inside was a small velvet box. When he opened it, the color drained from his face. A ring lay inside. Heavy. Cold. Engraved with the original family crest. The ring buried with the daughter. There was no note. No threat. Just the ring. And one thing more. A faint fingerprint pressed into the velvet lining. deliberate, alive. Across the city, in a high-rise overlooking the empire that once erased her, a young woman stood in the shadows. No longer a child. No longer helpless. She watched the estate lights flicker in the distance. Controlled. Patient. They thought the bloodline ended in smoke. They thought fear would keep the throne stable. But they forgot something powerful about children who survive assassinations. They grow up, and when they return, they don't knock. The empire believes it buried its future 8 years ago. But tonight the past just sent a message. And this time, she's not running. Fear spreads faster than bullets. And tonight, the empire is afraid. The ring had arrived without warning. No fingerprints in any database. No camera footage outside the estate gates. No intercepted communication. It was as if the past had slipped through concrete walls and steel doors without being seen. Inside the war room, the new Dawn, once the quiet strategist behind the widow's rise, stood at the head of the table. The girl is dead, one captain insisted. Then explain the ring, another replied. No one could. Because that ring wasn't just jewelry. It was authority. It symbolized the original bloodline. The old code. The kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought, only inherited. And now it had resurfaced. Within days, strange disruptions began. One offshore account, frozen. A warehouse shipment, intercepted by anonymous tip. A rival syndicate suddenly pulling back from a territory they had aggressively contested for months. None of it violent. None of it loud. But precise. Someone wasn't attacking the empire. Someone was testing it. The stepmother, still elegant, still controlled, watched the cracks forming in silence. She dismissed rumors publicly, but privately she ordered loyalty checks. Background re-verifications. Surveillance on her own captains. Paranoia became policy. Because whoever was behind this knew their structure too well. Across the city, in a private members-only club owned by the syndicate, a woman sat alone at the bar. She didn't wear diamonds. She didn't bring bodyguards. She didn't need to. Her presence was subtle, but intentional. She ordered the Don's favorite drink. The one only insiders knew he preferred. The bartender hesitated. How do you know about that? She gave a small smile. Family tradition. The security cameras captured her face for exactly 12 seconds before glitching. By the time guards reviewed the footage, she was gone. But not before leaving something behind. A handwritten note inside the restroom mirror's edge. 3 words. I remember everything. Inside the estate, tension thickened. The consigliere, an older man who had served both the father and the widow, began connecting patterns. The frozen accounts? They were set up 8 years ago under shell companies approved by the late Dawn. The intercepted shipment? It was routed through an old contact loyal to the bloodline. The rivals backing down? They had once owed personal favors to the father. This wasn't random sabotage. This was someone reclaiming leverage. Someone who had studied every weakness. And had waited. Meanwhile, captains began disappearing. Not killed. Not harmed. Just resigning. Leaving envelopes behind with one sentence written inside. He forgot who built this. Whispers started in private lounges and dark corners. What if she survived? What if that night wasn't about eliminating the bloodline, but rewriting it? The younger soldiers were confused. The older ones were uneasy. Because they remembered her. The quiet girl at the edge of the table. The one who watched more than she spoke. 8 years earlier, after crossing state lines under heavy rain, the bodyguard who saved her brought her to a safe house owned by an old ally of her father's. A man who believed in legacy. He trained her differently. Not in weapons. In patterns. In psychology. In power. You don't fight empires head-on, he told her. You make them question themselves. She studied criminal behavior. Negotiation tactics. Financial networks. The art of patience. While the empire celebrated her death, she was learning how to dismantle it without firing a single shot. Back in the present, the stepmother finally spoke during an emergency council meeting. She's trying to destabilize us, she said calmly. But ghosts can't rule. One captain asked the question no one dared before. What if she's not a ghost? Silence swallowed the room. Because if she was alive, then technically, by blood, the empire was hers. And that truth was more dangerous than any rival gang. That night, the consigliere received a private message. An address. No threats. No instructions. Just coordinates. Against his better judgment, he went alone. An abandoned opera house. Dust-covered seats. Cracked chandeliers. And on the stage, standing under a single beam of moonlight. No guards. No fear. Just calm authority. "You served my father," she said. He studied her face carefully. Same eyes. Same stillness. "You should be dead," he whispered. She stepped closer. They tried. No anger. No dramatic emotion. Just certainty. "Why reveal yourself now?" he asked. "Because fear grows faster when it has a face." The consigliere realized something chilling in that moment. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for restoration. But restoration would require collapse first. When he returned to the estate, his silence said more than words. The Don noticed. "Is she real?" he demanded. The old man hesitated, then nodded. And that was the moment the empire shifted. Not because of violence. Not because of war. But because belief changed. The heir wasn't a rumor anymore. She was strategy. Across the skyline, she stood again by the window of her high-rise apartment, watching the estate lights flicker like nervous signals. She knew they had seen her now. She wanted them to. Because power isn't just control. It's perception. And tonight, the empire no longer believed it was untouchable. They believed in something far more dangerous. But one question remains. If she could destabilize them from the shadows, why step into the light before the throne was empty? What move is she preparing next? Because ghosts don't haunt forever. Eventually, they claim what was buried with them. Power can be stolen, but blood cannot. And that is what makes this war different. The moment the consigliere confirmed she was alive, the empire split into two invisible factions. Those loyal to power, and those loyal to blood. Inside the estate's council chamber, tension pressed against the walls like a loaded weapon. The stepmother sat at the head of the table, poised, immaculate, unshaken on the surface. "She is manipulating you," she said calmly. "This is psychological warfare. Nothing more." But her voice lacked something it once had. Certainty. Because the captains were no longer just afraid. They were remembering. They remembered the old Don's rules. His discipline. His code. His promise that the empire would remain in his bloodline. And they remembered something else. The will. A sealed document drafted months before his assassination. It had never been publicly read. At the time, grief and urgency justified postponing it. Then postponing became forgetting. Now it became dangerous. "Where is the will?" one older captain asked. The stepmother's gaze hardened. It was irrelevant after the tragedy. Irrelevant. Across the city, she was not hiding anymore. She was moving. Strategically. First, she leaked documents to a rival syndicate, proof that the current regime had secretly siphoned profits meant to honor a long-standing territorial pact. The rival didn't attack. They withdrew. They waited. Because if the bloodline was returning, it meant stability. And in organized crime, stability is currency. Second, she exposed an internal trafficking operation the stepmother had authorized without council approval. Anonymous tips reached federal ears, not enough to destroy the empire, but enough to create pressure. Pressure creates fractures. Fractures create choices. And she wasn't forcing loyalty. She was offering it. One by one, captains received private messages. Not threats. Memories. Childhood details from inside the estate. The old Don's personal phrases. Moments only someone raised in those halls would know. "I remember when you broke your hand teaching me how to hold a blade," one message read. Another. "My father trusted you with the North Docks. Why don't you trust yourself?" It wasn't manipulation. It was inheritance. She wasn't asking for support. She was reminding them who they once swore loyalty to. Meanwhile, the stepmother tightened control. Phone lines monitored. Financial transfers triple-checked. Armed guards increased around the estate. But control born from fear feels different than control born from respect. The younger soldiers obeyed. The older ones hesitated. And hesitation is fatal in an empire built on command. The consigliere finally located the sealed will. Locked in a private vault under the estate. Untouched for 8 years. When he opened it alone in his office, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from realization. The will was clear. In the event of his death, the empire would pass to his daughter. Guardianship temporarily entrusted to his wife until the heir came of age. Guardianship, not ownership. The room felt smaller, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about legitimacy. That night, she requested a private meeting. No guards, no weapons, just her and the stepmother. They met in the old family garden, the only part of the estate left unchanged. Moonlight filtered through the trees. The fountain still whispered in the center. The stepmother arrived first. "You're reckless," she said without greeting. "Showing yourself like this." The heiress stepped from the shadows, calm as ever. "No," she replied softly. "Reckless would be attacking." Silence stretched between them. "You should have stayed gone," the stepmother said. "You don't understand what it takes to hold this empire together." The heiress tilted her head slightly. "I understand exactly what it takes. I watched you do it." A flicker crossed the stepmother's face. "Not guilt. Recognition." "You think blood makes you strong?" the stepmother asked. "No," the heiress answered. "It makes me inevitable." Those words hung heavier than any threat. Because the stepmother realized something in that moment. This wasn't a frightened child seeking revenge. This was a woman who had studied power for 8 years. And she wasn't here to destroy the empire. She was here to reclaim it. Inside the council chamber the following evening, tension exploded. The will was presented. Guess. Murmurs. Shifting allegiances. The stepmother stood, fury barely contained. She was a child, she snapped. The empire would have collapsed under her. One captain spoke carefully. Perhaps. But it was never ours to take. The divide was no longer invisible. It was official. Bloodline versus power. Legacy versus control. Emotion versus survival. But just as momentum began leaning toward the heiress, a new problem surfaced. Evidence emerged suggesting that the father's assassination may not have been solely orchestrated by the stepmother. There were additional financial transfers. Hidden approvals. A voice on an old security recording that didn't match hers. Someone else at that dinner table had sanctioned the hit, which meant the conspiracy ran deeper than anyone imagined. And if she took the throne, she might be sitting among the very men who signed her father's death warrant. Later that night, alone in her high-rise, she replayed the partial audio file recovered from the night of the assassination. A distorted voice. Commanding. "Do it now." She closed her eyes. Because she recognized something in that tone. Not certainty. Not anger. Calculation. The kind her father once used. And that realization was more terrifying than betrayal. Because what if the truth isn't that the empire betrayed her father? What if her father saw something coming and allowed it? As the city lights flickered below, one truth became undeniable. This war isn't about revenge anymore. It's about uncovering who truly holds power. And whether blood is strong enough to survive what it's about to reveal. Wars are not always announced with explosions. Some begin with silence. And this one has no gunfire. Only collapse. The empire is still standing, but barely. No bodies in the streets. No police raids. No public chaos. Just quiet erosion. One morning, 3 international accounts failed to process payroll for overseas operations. No hacking trace. No forced breach. The authorization codes were simply revoked. By someone who knew them. That same afternoon, a shipment scheduled to arrive at the eastern docks never leaves port. The shipping company cites contract confusion. A contract that only the inner circle had access to. Then the North Territory, once fiercely protected, declares neutrality in all internal disputes. Neutrality. In a mafia empire, neutrality is rebellion. Inside the estate, The stepmother paces the council chamber for the first time in years. This is economic warfare, she says sharply. She's destabilizing infrastructure. But there's something she doesn't say out loud. The heiress isn't targeting money. She's targeting confidence. The younger soldiers still take orders. They don't see the cracks. But the captains do. They feel it in late-night phone calls that go unanswered. In partners who suddenly request written confirmations instead of verbal trust. In rivals who are no longer intimidated. The empire is bleeding reputation. And reputation is everything. Meanwhile, she remains unseen. No press. No dramatic declarations. Only calculated moves. She releases sealed evidence to select council members. Proof of an unauthorized expansion into trafficking routes the father once forbade. Attached to the documents is a single line. This is not the empire he built. That sentence hits harder than any threat. Because it forces a question none of them want to answer. Did the empire survive, or did it mutate? The consigliere, burdened by age and conscience, begins digging deeper into the night of the assassination. He re-examines financial ledgers. Encrypted authorizations. Cross-reference timestamps. What he finds chills him. The stepmother authorized increased security inside the estate hours before the shooting. But she also reduced external patrols. Strategic. Controlled. Yet there's another anomaly. A secondary approval code was used to disable corridor cameras seconds before the fatal shot. That code belonged to someone else. Someone still seated at the council table. Which means the assassination wasn't a solo betrayal. It was a coalition. And the girl was never meant to die. She was meant to disappear. Because a dead heir creates sympathy. A missing heir creates uncertainty. Uncertainty can be controlled. That night, the heiress arranges another private meeting. This time, not in shadows. In the estate itself. She walks through the front gates unarmed. The guards hesitate. They recognize her. No one stops her. Because fear has shifted direction. Inside the grand hall, the council waits. The stepmother stands at the far end like a queen protecting a fragile crown. You're dismantling everything, the stepmother says. No, the heiress replies calmly. I'm revealing it. She places a folder on the long oak table, the same table where her father fell. Inside are copies of unauthorized deals, hidden accounts, strategic alliances formed without unanimous consent. You built growth, the heiress says quietly. But you sacrificed loyalty. The room is silent. Because loyalty is sacred currency. And once lost, it cannot be negotiated back. The stepmother makes a bold move. Even if what you're saying is true, she says sharply, you don't have the experience to hold this empire together. You've been gone 8 years. The heiress doesn't react. I was never gone, she answers. I was watching. She turns toward the captains. You don't need me to destroy this empire. It's already weakening. The question is simple. Do you want restoration or control? It's the first time she openly offers a choice. Not submission. And choice is dangerous in a hierarchy built on command. Hours later, a second envelope appears in the council chamber. No courier seen. No security breach detected. Inside is a small digital recorder. They press play. Static. Then a voice from 8 years ago. Measured. Do it now. The gunshot follows. The voice isn't distorted enough to hide tone. The consigliere's face pales. Because he recognizes it. It doesn't belong to the stepmother. It belongs to one of the senior captains still present in the room. A man who has publicly supported the heiress's return. The realization detonates silently. The conspiracy was layered. Some wanted power. Others wanted leverage. And some simply wanted survival. Later, alone on the estate balcony where her father once stood, the heiress watches the city lights flicker. She knows what the recording has done. Trust is gone. And without trust, alliances collapse. But she also understands something darker. If she takes the throne now, she inherits not just power, but rot. The empire is infected from within. And exposure may cause it to implode entirely. The stepmother approaches quietly. For all your strategy, she says softly, you still don't see the final move. The heiress doesn't look at her. And what is that? The stepmother's voice lowers. Power doesn't belong to blood. It belongs to whoever survives long enough to carry its weight. The pause. Are you ready for what that weight costs? For the first time, doubt flickers across the heiress's face. Because survival may require more than reclaiming a throne. It may require becoming the very thing she once despised. As the wind moves through the garden below, one truth settles over the estate. This war has no gunfire, no explosions, no public casualties. But by the time it ends, someone at that table will not walk away. And the throne may not survive the battle to claim it. Every empire promises power. None of them warn you about the cost. The council chamber has never felt smaller. The digital recorder still sits on the oak table, the same table where her father bled out 8 years ago. The voice on it exposed one traitor. But it also exposed something worse. The empire was never unified. It was layered with secrets. And now, all of them are surfacing at once. The captain identified by the recording denies nothing. He doesn't beg. He doesn't explain. He simply says, your father saw weakness in the structure. He believed fear wasn't enough anymore. The room tightens. What are you saying? The heiress asks quietly. I'm saying, he replies, he knew the empire needed transformation. And he knew it would never happen peacefully. A chilling possibility enters the air. What if the assassination wasn't a hostile takeover? What if it was a controlled sacrifice? The stepmother watches carefully. You always thought I betrayed him, she says to the heiress. But you never asked why security was tightened inside that night. The heiress's voice remains steady. Why? Because your father knew someone would move against him. He let it happen. Silence swallows the chamber. The consigliere steps forward, shaken. That's impossible. Is it? The stepmother counters. He rewrote the will weeks before his death. He restructured offshore holdings. He placed assets in dormant accounts under coded beneficiaries. All pointing to one conclusion. He was preparing for collapse. Or evolution. The heiress feels the ground shift beneath her. For 8 years, she believed she survived betrayal. But what if she survived intention? What if her father allowed the throne to fracture, so she could rebuild it stronger? The captain who ordered the shot speaks again. He told me the empire was rotting from complacency. He said loyalty born from comfort becomes weakness. He needed the illusion of betrayal. An illusion? She whispers. You were never meant to die, he says. You were meant to disappear. To grow beyond these walls. Her chest tightens, not with grief, but with realization. Her exile may have been engineered. Not to erase her, but to prepare her. But here's the problem with controlled chaos. It rarely stays controlled. Because others had their own agendas. The stepmother's voice sharpens. He may have planned disruption, she says, but I stabilized what he shattered. I carried the weight. I protected this empire while you were studying it from a distance. And she's right. Under her rule, profits rose. Territories expanded. Rivals were contained. The empire didn't crumble. It adapted. Which means this final conflict isn't about good versus evil. It's about two philosophies. Bloodline destiny versus survival-driven power. The council calls for a final vote. Not of loyalty. Of leadership. Each captain must choose who will hold the throne moving forward. The heiress stands at one end of the table. The stepmother at the other. Between them lies the weight of 8 years. One by one, votes are cast in silence. The room becomes suffocating. Not because of fear. But because everyone understands what this means. There will be no more shadows after tonight. No more psychological games. Whoever wins inherits everything, including the rot. Just before the final vote is counted, the doors close. Locked from the inside. The heiress steps forward. I don't want revenge, she says evenly. And I don't want symbolism. I want transparency. She turns toward the captain who fired the fatal shot. You followed his order. But you chose not to tell the truth. He nods once. Yes. Why? because truth destabilizes power. She absorbs that, then turns to the stepmother. You protected the empire, but you hid the foundation. The stepmother's gaze doesn't waver, because foundations crack when exposed. The heiress finally understands. This throne was never clean. It was always built on controlled deception. And if she claims it, she becomes responsible for maintaining that illusion. Outside, rain begins to fall against the estate windows. Inside, the final vote is whispered to the consigliere. He looks up, his face unreadable. Before he can speak, a gunshot echoes. Deafening. The lights flicker. Screams erupt. Guards rush the doors. When they burst inside, someone is on the floor. But the camera never shows who. Only chaos. Only confusion. Only the heavy sound of something metallic spinning across marble. The family ring. Rolling. Turning. Until it falls still at the center of the room. Hours later, the estate gates remain closed. No official announcement is made. No confirmation leaks to the streets. The empire waits. Because in organized crime, perception shapes reality. And uncertainty creates obedience. Across the city skyline, rumors ignite like wildfire. Did the heiress win? Did the stepmother eliminate her? Did the captain silence them both? No one knows. But one truth spreads quickly. The throne devours anyone who tries to sit on it. Because power isn't inherited. It isn't seized. It consumes. And somewhere inside that estate, a decision has been made. A new era has begun. But whether it belongs to blood or to survival remains buried behind locked doors. And that uncertainty is more powerful than any crown.